Soham murders. The Soham murders are the murders of two 10-year-old girls which occurred in Soham, Cambridgeshire, England, on 4 August 2002. The victims, Holly Marie Wells and Jessica Amy Chapman, were lured into the home of a local resident, Ian Kevin Huntley, who subsequently murdered the children likely via asphyxiation before disposing of their bodies in an irrigation ditch close to Rathlakenheath, Suffolk. The girls' bodies were discovered on 17 August 2002. Ian Huntley was convicted of the murder of both girls on 17 December 2003 and sentenced to 2 terms of life imprisonment, with the High Court later imposing a minimum term of 40 years. His girlfriend, Maxine Ann Carr, the girls' teaching assistant, had knowingly provided Huntley with a false alibi. She received a 3.5-year prison sentence for conspiring with Huntley to pervert the course of justice. The efforts made to locate Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in the 13 days of their disappearance have been described as one of the most intense and extensive in British criminal history. At 11:45 a.m. on Sunday 4 August 2002, Jessica Chapman left her home in Brook Street, Soham, to attend a barbecue at the home of her best friend, Holly Wells, in nearby Red House Gardens. Prior to leaving her home, Chapman informed her parents of her intention to also give her friend a necklace engraved with the letter H she had purchased for her on a recent family holiday to Menorca. At Wells' home, the two girls and a friend named Natalie Parr played computer games and listened to music for approximately 30 minutes before Parr returned home. By 3:15 p.m., both girls had changed into distinctive replica Manchester United football shirts, one of which belonged to Holly and the other to her older brother, Oliver. At 5:04 p.m., a photograph of the two friends was taken by Wells' mother before the children ate dinner with the other house guests. They then returned to playing in Wells' bedroom at approximately 6:10 p.m. At approximately 6:15 p.m., the two girls left the Wells residence without informing any of the house guests to purchase sweets from a vending machine at the local sports center. While returning to 4 Red House Gardens, Wells and Chapman walked past the college-close home of Ian Huntley, the senior caretaker at the local secondary school. Huntley evidently lured the girls into his house, stating that his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, the girls' teaching assistant at St. Andrew's Primary School, was also present in the house. Carr was actually visiting her mother in Grimsby, Lincolnshire on this date. The precise chain of events to occur after the girls entered 5 College Close is unknown, although investigators believe sections of Huntley's later claims in initial interviews granted to the media prior to his arrest and his later trial testimony, such as that he had been cleaning his dog at the time the girls passed by his house at approximately 6:30 p.m. and that one girl had been suffering from a mild nosebleed, may have actually been true. In any event, the cause of death of both girls was later ruled to be asphyxiation. Chapman's Nokia mobile phone was switched off at 6:46 p.m. At 8 p.m., Nicola Wells entered her daughter's bedroom to invite the girls to say goodbye to her house guests, only to discover both children were missing from their home. Alarmed, she and her husband, Kevin, searched their house and nearby streets. Minutes after their daughter's 8:30 p.m. curfew had expired, Nicola Wells phoned the Chapman residence to determine if the girls were at this location, only to learn Leslie and Sharon Chapman were becoming concerned why their youngest daughter had not returned home. Following subsequent frantic efforts by the families of both girls to locate their daughters, Wells and Chapman were reported missing by their parents at 9:55 p.m. Police immediately launched an intensive manhunt to locate the missing children. Over 400 officers were assigned full-time to search for the girls. These officers conducted extensive house-to-house inquiries across Soham. Their efforts to search local terrain were bolstered by the assistance of hundreds of local volunteers and, later, United States Air Force personnel stationed at nearby airbases. To assist in their public appeals for information, Cambridgeshire Police released the photograph Nicola Wells had taken of the children less than 2 hours before their disappearance, depicting both girls wearing distinctive Manchester United replica football shirts. A physical description of each girl was also released to the media, describing both girls as being white, approximately 4 feet 6 in tall, and slim. Chapman was described as being tanned, with shoulder-length, brown hair. Wells was described as being fair, with blonde hair. The parents of both girls were adamant their daughters had been wary of talking with strangers, having warned them not to trust individuals they did not know from early childhood. This insistence was supported by the head teacher of St. Andrew's Primary School, who informed reporters, "The possible danger from strangers is something we have impressed upon the children from an early age." Suspecting the children had been kidnapped, investigators questioned every registered sex offender in Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire. Over 260 registered sex offenders across the United Kingdom, including 15 high-risk pedophiles, were also questioned, although all were eliminated from the enquiry. Police also investigated the possibility that the girls had arranged to meet with an individual either or both had contacted via an internet chat room, although this possibility was soon discounted. On the 8th of August, CCTV footage of the girls, recorded minutes before their disappearance, was released to the public. This footage depicted the children arriving at the local sports center at 6:28 p.m. A televised reconstruction of the children's last known movements was also broadcast nationally on the 10th of August, and both sets of parents granted an interview with presenter Colin Baker on ITV's Current Affairs program Tonight, which was broadcast on the 12th of August. Other family members and friends of both girls also appealed via the media for the safe return of the children. These appeals for information regarding the whereabouts of Wells and Chapman would see more than 2,000 phone calls and tips received from the public, with all information obtained entered into the investigation's Holmes 2 database. A candlelight vigil was held by the community on the 7th of August. Shortly after the children's disappearance, Staffordshire police contacted their counterparts to report their suspicions the girls' likely abduction may be linked to an abduction which had occurred in their jurisdiction the previous year, in which a 6-year-old girl had survived an indecent assault by an abductor who was still at large and whose green Ford Mondeo was identified as having number plates which had earlier been stolen in Peterborough. The individual responsible for this abduction and assault was also believed to have followed a 12-year-old girl in the same area, although in this instance, his car had been fitted with number plates which had been stolen in Nottinghamshire. The same vehicle had recently been sighted in Glatton, Cambridgeshire. This information was later included in a televised appeal pertaining to the children's disappearance on the BBC's Crime Watch, although this potential lead ultimately failed to bear fruition or relevance. On the 16th of August, 12 days after the children's disappearance, Huntley and Carr were first questioned by police. Both were questioned for approximately 7 hours. Each provided formal witness statements to investigators before being placed in a safe house in the village of Histon. By this date, police had received information from several Grimsby residents who had recognized Ian Huntley in the television interviews he had granted to the media. These individuals recalled that he had been accused of rape several years earlier. Other individuals recalled that, contrary to her own televised claims, Maxine Carr had in fact been socializing in Grimsby town centre on the night that the girls had disappeared, and not at home in Soham as she had indicated in the interview she had granted to the media. The same evening, police conducted a thorough search of both 5 College Close and the grounds of Soham Village College, where Huntley worked as a senior caretaker as the couple remained under police watch at separate locations outside Soham. Although each room of Huntley's home had evidently been recently and meticulously cleaned with what was later described as being of lemony cleaning fluid, these searches located numerous items declared as being of major importance to the ongoing investigation. Although the evidence and artifacts were not made public at the time, the items recovered from the school grounds included items of clothing the girls had been wearing when last seen, including their charred and cut Manchester United shirts, which were recovered from a bin within a hangar at Huntley's place of work. Fibers recovered upon these items of clothing proved to be a precise match to samples retrieved from both Huntley's body, his clothing and from 5 College Close. Furthermore, his fingerprints were recovered from the bin. Huntley's car was also subjected to a detailed forensic examination on the 16th of August. The forensic examination of this vehicle revealed the car had also been recently, extensively cleaned, although traces of a distinctive mixture of brick dust, chalk and concrete of precisely the same type used to pave the road leading to where the girls' bodies would be discovered were found around the wheel arches and upon and around the pedals. Furthermore, a cover from the rear seat was missing, and the lining of the boot had been recently removed and replaced with an ill-fitting section of household carpet. Having discovered the children's clothes at Soham Village College, police decided to arrest Huntley and Carr. Both were arrested on suspicion of abduction and murder at 4:30 a.m. on the 17th of August. Although investigators had publicly stated they strongly believed the children had been abducted on the 7th of August, they publicly announced their strong suspicions both girls had been murdered on this date. During initial questioning, Huntley refused to answer questions and appeared evasive, confused, and emotionally detached, occasionally drooling throughout police attempts to question him in an effort to feign symptoms of mental illness. This tactic left police with no option but to initially refer Huntley to a mental hospital to undergo an extensive psychological evaluation. By contrast, Carr quickly confessed to detectives she had lied about her whereabouts and her partner's actions on the 4th of August as, shortly before she had returned to Soham from Grimsby 3 days later, Huntley had claimed to her in a phone call to have seen the two girls shortly before their disappearance, admitting, "The thing is, Maxine, they came in our house." According to Carr, Huntley then informed her the children had entered their home in order that Wells could staunch her nosebleed. He then claimed to her Chapman had sat upon their bed as he had helped Wells control the bleeding from her nose before both girls had left their home. Referencing one of the 1998 rapes he had committed but had earlier claimed to her to have been falsely accused of in this phone call, Huntley then began voicing concerns as to again being falsely accused of involvement on this occasion, also claiming his previous arrest had caused him to suffer a nervous breakdown. She had therefore later agreed to concoct a false story with her partner to support his version of events. After being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies and the ample evidence attesting to Huntley's guilt, including his fingerprints being recovered from the bin in which the children's clothes had been found, Carr burst into tears, shouting, "No! He can't have been. It can't have been. He hasn't done it." Despite these revelations, Carr initially remained emotionally attached to Huntley. While held on remand at Holloway Prison, she regularly inquired as to his welfare, and is known to have penned several letters in which she professed her continued love for him. Carr would only sever all contact with Huntley in June 2003. At approximately 12:30 p.m. on the 17th of August, a 48-year-old gamekeeper named Keith Pryor discovered the bodies of both girls lying side by side in a 5-feet-deep irrigation ditch close to a pheasant pen near the perimeter fence of Rathlakenheath in Suffolk, a location more than 10 miles east of Soham. Pryor had noticed what he later described as an unusual and unpleasant smell in the vicinity several days earlier. When returning to the area with two friends on the 17th of August, he had decided to investigate the cause of this odor. Walking through an overgrown verge approximately 600 yards from a partially tarmacked road, Pryor and one of his companions, Adrian Lawrence, discovered the children's bodies. Immediately upon viewing the corpses, Lawrence turned in the direction of his girlfriend, Helen Sawyer, and shouted, "Don't come any closer, Helen. Get back in the van." Lawrence immediately reported the discoveries to police. Both girls had been missing for 13 days when their bodies were found, and both corpses were in an advanced state of decomposition. In an apparent effort to destroy forensic evidence, the murderer or murderers had attempted to burn both bodies. In addition, no clear footprints were discovered at the crime scene. Despite the perpetrator's efforts to destroy evidence and hinder identification, investigators rapidly deduced who the two victims most likely were, and that both had not died at the location of their discovery. Numerous hairs later determined to belong to Jessica Chapman were also discovered on a tree branch close to the location of the girls' bodies. The following day, a Cambridgeshire Deputy Chief Constable named Keith Hodder released a press statement to the media confirming the discovery of the children's bodies, adding that both families had been informed of the developments and that although positive formal identification would take several days, investigators were as certain as they possibly could be the bodies were those of Wells and Chapman. By the 20th of August, investigators had established sufficient physical evidence from Huntley's home, vehicle and Soham Village College to formally charge him with 2 counts of murder. He was formally charged with these offences while detained for observation at Rampton Secure Hospital, and all preliminary hearings against him were postponed until the conclusions of his mental health assessment. Maxine Carr was also charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice on this date. She was further charged with 2 counts of assisting an offender on the 16th of January 2003. The funeral services for Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were conducted on consecutive days in September 2002. Services for both children were held at St. Andrew's Parish Church and both were officiated by the Reverend Tim Alban Jones. Both girls were laid to rest in private ceremonies attended by only family and close friends. At the request of both families that their privacy be respected, the media refrained from reporting upon either service. On 10 December, counsels for both prosecution and defense delivered their closing arguments to the jury. Richard Latham delivered his closing argument on behalf of the prosecution by describing both Huntley and Carr as accomplished liars before outlining the prosecution's case. Both children had to die to satisfy Huntley's selfish self-interest before Huntley, with Carr's support, had embarked on 12 days of cynical deception, with Carr only revealing the truth about her lies to police after being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies. The jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching their verdicts against both defendants. On 17 December 2003, they returned a majority verdict of guilty on 2 counts of murder against Huntley. He was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of imprisonment to be imposed by the Lord Chief Justice at a later date. Huntley's face displayed no emotion as the verdict was announced, although the mothers of both Wells and Chapman burst into tears. Huntley's actual motive for killing the children is unknown, although minutes prior to encountering Wells and Chapman, he is known to have engaged in a heated argument with Maxine Carr, culminating in his slamming the telephone down. Huntley had allegedly suspected Carr of conducting affairs throughout their relationship, leading both his mother and some police officers to suspect Huntley had killed the 2 girls in a fit of jealous rage. However, prior to his trial, a criminal profile had resulted in his being ruled by an eminent criminal psychologist as a latent, predatory pedophile who had chosen to lure Wells and Chapman into his home upon a moment of opportunism. The prosecution had contended at Huntley's trial a likely sexual motive existed for the murders. Testimony from Carr had indicated her suspicions sexual activity had occurred in their home in her absence, as, although Huntley had insisted throughout the entirety of their relationship that Carr perform all domestic chores, she had observed that he had washed the quilts, pillowcases and sheets of their bed in her absence. However, pathological evidence retrieved from the bodies indicating at least one of the girls had been subjected to a sexual assault either before or after her murder was not disclosed to the jury at Huntley's trial. The reason for this decision had been that both bodies were too extensively decomposed and damaged by fire to enable a conclusive determination of either the actual cause of death or if either girl had been subjected to a sexual assault. Although prosecutors at Huntley's trial contended he had intentionally lured the children into his house with a likely sexual motivation, investigators found no evidence of premeditation in relation to the murders. However, at the September 2005 hearing in which the minimum term Huntley should serve before any form of parole eligibility was decided, Justice Alan Moses stated, "There is a likelihood of sexual motivation, but there was no evidence of sexual activity, and it remains no more than a likelihood." The minimum term of imprisonment Huntley should serve before being considered eligible for parole was decided on 29 September 2005. On this date, High Court Judge Mr. Justice Moses announced that Huntley must remain in prison until he had served a minimum of 40 years imprisonment, a term which would not allow parole eligibility until 2042, by which time Huntley would be 68 years old. In setting this minimum term of imprisonment, Mr. Justice Moses stated, "The order I make offers little or no hope of the defendant's eventual release." Huntley avoided eligibility for a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment, as the passing of the 2003 Criminal Justice Act had been just 1 day after his conviction, thus taking effect on 18 December 2003 and applying solely to murders committed on or after this date. So, what's your theory on what happened? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.